and welcome to 2 Day Rentals. Today I'm going to be ranking my top 5 Xenomorph.
Excuse me, sir. A what?
Xenomorph.
It's a bug hunt. What exactly are we dealing with here?
Yes, it's going to be like a bug hunt, Hicks. I'll be ranking my top 5 Xenomorph figures from the Kenner's Aliens toy line that came out in 1992 and had a short little run till around 95, 96.
They're unstoppable! But we're gonna stop them anyway! Send in the Marines! We're the Space Marines! Drake, Ripley, Apone, Bishop, and I'm Hicks, armed with the latest high-tech heavy metal.
Look out, Hicks! The Queen's gonna crown ya! My bug walker's on a roll! Bull alien attacking! Eat torch, bug brain!
Alien invasion problem? Send in the Marines!
Aliens! Send in the Marines!
Space Marines! Aliens!
Initially, when this figure line was being proposed, there was also going to be a cartoon that came out along with it called Operation Aliens. Ultimately, that cartoon never saw the light of day. There were some rumors floating around that there may be a pilot that was created that still is out there in existence, but sadly that's not the case. Just a few animation cells were put together to sort of demonstrate what they potentially could do with the cartoon, and ultimately they scratched it, which is very sad. The branding for Operations Aliens, which is the name of the cartoon, or the proposed cartoon, did make its way out into the store shelves. As a matter of fact, I have the figure case here. There were some other items you can't put the Operations Aliens branding on. You have this exercise book pack is what they're calling it here. It looks like it has a pencil, a pen, a eraser, and a sketchbook. This is not really that hard to come by. However, there are a few items that are extremely hard to come by. There's a t-shirt, there's a poster, even an electronic handheld game, and, well, that's just way out of my price range for items like that. They had quite a bit of stuff planned for this line that never saw the light of day, and when we do our retrospective of this entire line, we'll definitely go over those things. If you haven't already, take a chance after this video to go check out some of my other content on my channel. I do all sorts of stuff here. It could be a ranking video, could be a let's play, it could be a retrospective or review, but if it has to do with movies, video games, collectibles, even some music from time to time, we're going to talk about it here on this channel. So, let's jump right in and rank these bad boys. So picture this, it's 1992. Your 9-year-old self has taken a trip to Walmart with the family, and what do? You immediately make a direct line to the toy aisle, to the toy section, and you go right for the action figure aisle. And you know which one it is, because they got them all broken up into different things. You turn a corner, and you see something very similar to this. A wall of Aliens figures that you had no idea exist. Yeah, you better believe that young me, I had to pick my jaw up off the ground and roll my tongue back into my head because I was absolutely drooling. You know, by that time, Aliens was my favorite movie and probably still is today, and I had no idea that these things exist, and that's kind of how it was back then. Unless you saw a commercial or you happened to have a magazine that was showing teasers or advertisements, you had no idea. And so, like you do as a kid, you ask your parents, can I please take one of these precious items home with me? And very, very fortunate for me, my mom was like, absolutely, you can choose one. How many times have you heard that? Well, you can choose one. I had a pretty tough decision to make. However, I will say that they didn't have the entire first wave available. They just had 3 figures, and I remember this day like it was yesterday. They had Bishop, Ripley, and the Queen alien, which leads me right into my number 5 pick. You know, I gotta say that me choosing as my number 5 ranked Xenomorph from this line has a lot to do with the nostalgia factor of this being the first figure from this line that I took home with me and actually owned, but I do really like this figure. It's a pretty good sculpt of the Queen alien. It stands taller and larger than the rest of the figures, which would make sense since she is the Queen. I will say though that it isn't the best Queen figure from Kenner. As a matter of fact, the Queen playset that they did has one of the best Alien Queen, Xenomorph Queen figures that has ever been made, in my opinion. That's a really cool playset. This one's, it's got good movement, decent little articulation. It's got a tail whipping action, which plays really well with the power loader if you're gonna play out that final scene that we all know. It actually has this really interesting little feature where the back part of the head, it's got like a little air pocket in it. And if you punch it, third mouth or that extending jaw comes out. What does it say? What does it say here? It says, attacking double jaws and whipping spike tail. I actually have this one on the card. As a matter of fact, I know that I mentioned before, I don't keep a lot of figures on the card or in boxes, and I don't. However, this line means so much to me that I almost have the entire first series on card. What I love about this particular one that I have is it has the Walmart sticker on it and the price tag, and Walmart's actually where I got this figure for the first time. And it comes with a little baby queen alien, which is neat too. You know what? I think it's a special figure. I think it's a really neat one, and you know, I don't know. I like it. One little factoid about the Queen alien that I find interesting is she was the only carded figure from the first series that didn't come with the comic. I thought that was a neat feature that they included comics with these, and as a matter of fact, all those comics were really hard to find for a while, and they've been since re-released into a hardback book with a lot of other Aliens comics. So if you're on the hunt for those, if you're looking to read those, I highly recommend that you do. The Aliens comics are fantastic, and that little mini comic series from the figures is really neat. The Queen alien didn't come with one. So moving right along to number 4, it's the Mantis, the praying mantis alien. As a kid, I really wasn't that interested in this one. I never saw it out on the store shelves. I did see it in advertisements and in those little Kenner catalogs, but this was never one that I actually saw locally in my toy stores or in Walmart or KB. And even if I did whenever I was a kid, I probably wouldn't have picked it up. It just didn't interest me as much. I wanted my aliens to look like the aliens from the movie then. But now, I have a whole different appreciation for the design that went into some of these different Xenomorphs. This one came out in Series 2, which was, I believe, in '93. The original Series 2 is this translucent green with a silver airbrush on it. There was actually a repaint that came out for KB Toys. It still has that really, really cool translucent green mold, but it's got a black, darker airbrush paint over it. I like them both. I think I kind of prefer the silver one, maybe. He's got some gold teeth too, man. He's gangsta. You know, what I find fascinating about what they did with this toy line was they sort of would crossbreed different insects and animals with xenomorphs. Interestingly enough, and there's some debate about this, we know how the aliens' life cycle works, right? Facehugger, they attach themselves to a living being, they ingest a host with an egg, and that egg then bursts out, and we have the species of alien. Praying mantis is kind of small, so are there little tiny facehuggers? I think what we have here is something that's been modified in a lab or genetically altered and with an insect. And as we know in the lore of Alien, Weyland-Yutani was trying to weaponize these xenomorphs, so I could definitely see this playing into that somehow. To my knowledge, it doesn't go into anywhere in the comics or anything about how these came to existence, but that's the beauty of action figures and toys. You have the toy itself, but then you could create any number of backstory or whatever you want. You're setting them up and displaying them, taking pictures of, playing with them. You're playing with them. I think it's just fascinating from that standpoint that a praying mantis was involved in the design. It looks like something that would come out of a kaiju film maybe, or maybe an old Universal monster, but these are really, really neat, and that's why they made my top 5. We got a 3 for 3 on number 3. It's an interesting thing that they did here, and this was a common thread throughout this line. They would take these xenomorphs, aliens, or even some of the colonial marines and repaint them and re-release them. And they did just that with this particular mold. What you have here is the Panther alien. It's an awesome paint job on this. It has this translucent top. This particular figure doesn't have the action working on it, but when you point its head down, this kamikaze parasite is what they're calling it. Shoots out of its neck. This is such a cool one. Now, the reason this one makes my list is not only because of just the design and how it looks, but there were 2 other variations of this one, and I do believe at 3 different variants, this particular mold had the most variants within the line, if I'm not mistaken. Viewers, if you know more about that, please comment down below. My favorite of the 3 is the Night Cougar alien. It doesn't have that translucent top. I kind of wish it did, but where it makes up for it is this really, really awesome paint job. It's black with the silver top and these red stripes on it, making it look very, very menacing. And I just think it's a really, really, really neat thing that they did there. There is also another variation that was released with a Vasquez figure, and they're also calling this another Night Cougar alien, and it's just kind of got the simple black undercoat with a silver airbrush on it. Not nearly as cool as the other 2, but all 3 together, in my mind, I envision these 3 hunting in a pack. The Night Cougar with the red stripes being sort of the alpha, and they always hunt in 3s, and they sometimes quarrel with each other, which would leave them vulnerable for the Colonial Marines to jump in and see, I'm spitballing. That's why I love this stuff. That's nowhere in the comic books or the lore, but it's things that I just, in my mind, I've come up with. And these are just really neat. I love that they did 3 different variations of them. 2 out of the 3 are just amazing paint jobs, all original, and they're just really, really cool. Right, number 2 on my list. We go from number 3, which had the most variants, to one that only had 1 single variant, and that is the Wild Boar alien from Series 2, I believe, or was it Series 3? Series 3, 1993. And this one is, again, it's a kind of a low-laying, crawling type alien. It's got an enormous sort of head on it, which is, by itself, is really neat. It really stands out. It really reads really well if you're photographing it. And it has one of the cooler sort of secondary features. If you stand it up on all 4s and you press down on its front legs, those sort of porcupine-looking tusks come out the top. These tusks themselves are like a translucent orange, and it plays really well with these little accent orange pieces on the dome of the Xenomorph's head. It's not one I had as a kid, it's one that I've acquired much later, but I just think this one is really, really neat. It's one of the last sort of variations they did in Series 3, and there wasn't another repaint of this one. It wasn't one that they rebranded or repackaged. And on top of it, look at it. Kata! I'd say my only, I guess, gripe about this one is the rest of the paint sort of seems uninspired. It's got this sort of olive drab, sort of greenish brown color underneath with an airbrushed black top. You know, they could have done something a bit different, which would have been neat, but all in all, it's a really, really neat figure, and it looks really, really cool. And before we get on to number 1, I just thought I'd talk briefly about some other notable entries into the Xenomorph figures. And I like I said, I wasn't going to do a full-on review of all the aliens. Eventually I will. I'll go over all of them. One that didn't make my list, spoiler alert, it's not my number 1, is the Scorpion alien. And there's a couple of reasons why. As a kid, I thought it looked most like the movies, or the Xenomorphs from the movies, and it just looks so awesome. And to this day, I still really like it. But as I've gotten older, I kind of feel like my tastes gravitate towards the original sort of Xenomorphs that have their own unique sort of aesthetic and backstory. And this one just, I mean, it's awesome looking. It's got an incredible paint job. It's got that sort of copper shiny finish. There was a repaint variant that's the black with the silver airbrush. This one has this exploding action where it sort of burst open. But I think the reason it just barely missed the list for me is because it looks a little bit too much like the aliens from the movie. For a lot of people, this is their favorite still, and I've seen that a lot on people's sort of list or when they talk about this line. So I just wanted to show it some love. And actually, I remember the Scorpion alien as a kid being a little bit harder to find. And I think it's just because people that were adults or just kind of casually looking at this stuff are like, oh my god, aliens, and that kind of looks like, and they probably picked it up. And I guess for that reason, maybe it was just a bit harder to find, or at least it was for me. But I had to show the Scorpion alien some love. And like I said, there's a lot of different varying Xenomorphs in this line, and they're all cool. And I do really like what they did with all of them. There's not one that I can say like, you know, like that's kind of weird. But in due time, I will make sure and cover all of them. All right, should we have a drum roll? I think we should. Well, it's not quite the drum roll I was thinking, but I've always liked that drum cadence in the film. Okay, so my number one favorite Xenomorph from the Kenner Aliens toy line has gotta be the Gorilla Alien. And it has been my favorite since I was little. This one has always been right near the top for me. I believe this was the second Xenomorph that I got as a kid. The Queen Alien was the first figure I picked up in this line, and then I believe for my birthday I got a few of the Colonial Marines, and I believe the Power Loader, and then this one came shortly after. And I just love everything about the design of this Xenomorph. The sculpt on all these figures is great, and this one's no exception. I just love the idea of, again, the cross sort of breeding with other creatures. And a gorilla combined with a Xenomorph is absolutely terrifying. It's just such a cool idea that they took those two. This one actually has two different variations. There was the original sort of blue airbrushed over that black with the blue detailing on the head, and then there was the Kenner repaint, which has a black base but this very subtle purple sort of airbrush on there, which is neat within itself, but I still love the original with that blue sort of glistening hue to it. It's awesome. Only thing that I would say that I'm just not quite understanding or I'm not super fond of with this one is one of the two sort of attack abilities that it has, or special abilities that it has, is it squirts this like water or something out of it. I'm assuming it's supposed to be water. Maybe it's acid out of its mouth. I don't know of any gorilla that spits, like a spitting gorilla. Spitting Gorilla would be a good name for a band. Actually, I was in a band in high school called the Spitting Gorillas. A reggae punk electronic band. Didn't really catch on, but nowadays it seems like it'd be all the rage. But if you want to name your band Spitting Gorillas, go right ahead. I'm not quite sure why that was a thing. It just didn't make a lot of sense to me. But its other action is this, much similar to the Praying Mantis, is this sort of grabbing action, which plays extremely well with the rest of the figures. I mean, in the movies, I remember on several occasions throughout all the films that the aliens like to grab their victims, take them away, sometimes cocoon them, sometimes take them and just destroy them right then and there. But that sort of grabbing action is something the figure was included with, and it plays really well with the rest of the figures. The Gorilla Alien actually has made an appearance in a couple of video games, and I do believe so did the Snake Alien and the Flying Queen, which didn't make my list, but they're still really cool. The Gorilla Alien's definitely number one in my book, has been since the get-go and continues to be to this day. All right, viewers, so what did you think? Do you agree with my top 5? Do you have a different top 5? Did you know anything about this line? I would love to hear from each and every one of you. Drop me a line down below. Make sure to hit that subscribe and notification button so that way you can stay up to date with all the crazy stuff I'm doing here, because believe me, we're going to get crazy. And I really appreciate each and every one of you tuning in and making 2-day rentals really something special. Make sure you be kind as you rewind through time, and we'll see you here again.